Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday evening out there. Hope we all had a wonderful work week as we kind of begin to close things out here going into Friday. And honestly, for a lot of folks, it's going to be a beautiful Friday and also a pretty good start to the weekend. Although, unfortunately, we do have some unsettled weather on the horizon going later into this weekend. And of course, Hurricane Lee still yet to impact the northeastern United States. But those impacts are coming really starting going into tomorrow evening and lasting into the early half of the weekend. So, very busy weekend ahead for a lot of folks. Some people, of course, going to be out there probably on a hike enjoying it. Other people going to be hunkering down as we have some pretty gusty conditions in store for a big section of Maine and much more of New England. So with that said, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so, as that does help the channel out a lot. And if you like the video, definitely hit that like button and maybe share it with somebody you might know that is likely to be affected here starting really within the next 24 hours by what is currently Hurricane Lee. With that said, though, let's go ahead and jump right into that forecast. So taking a look at satellite imagery right now, obviously the big kind of elephant in the room here is Hurricane Lee. As you can tell, that is this big swirling kind of cinnamon bun looking thing out over the Atlantic Ocean. He is still still currently a hurricane and will continue to march northward over the next 24 to 48 hours before finally making landfall, likely kind of right between Maine and Nova Scotia as we go into our Saturday and Sunday. So again, a very active time ahead for those folks up there. Now, the other big story is this big area of high pressure that has been dominating the pattern throughout the Great Lakes region, the Ohio River Valley, and now funneling that cooler, drier, clearer air into the Carolinas. So this afternoon here in Charlotte, it has actually felt quite nice as those lower dew points have begun to work their way in, and it hasn't even been that hot today, only got into the lower 80s. So again, starting to get to that time of the year where it really starts to feel nice outside and you really want to get out there and enjoy it while it lasts. Now, we have still unfortunately had some pretty cloudy conditions and even rainy conditions down through a lot of the Gulf states and down through southern sections of Texas, Louisiana, Little Rock. Also seen some of those storms back down towards Jackson, Mississippi. Been pretty cloudy afternoon. But again, if you're north of this high pressure, it's been quite nice. It's just kind of the edge of this high pressure, if you will, that unfortunately is still being trapped by a little bit of that warm Gulf air. So having to work with that a little bit, but I do see some hope on the horizon that looks like a bit of a more widespread cool down and even nicer fall weather for more people compared to what we're seeing with this current high pressure system. Now, taking a look at radar imagery, this is that front I just mentioned, that kind of next shot of cooler, drier air. Right now, bringing some unsettled weather back out towards the plains, the Rocky Mountains, back towards Denver, seeing some rain. And of course, what's in front of that, though, is still that nicer weather. So again, kind of got one front here. We've got another front still kind of just sagging across the southern tier of the country, and everything kind of in between the two are seeing really nice weather. Now, zooming in here on the northeast, where obviously we do have the big story with Hurricane Lee, we already have tropical storm watches and warnings up for the coastline of Maine, the coastline of Massachusetts. This does include the Boston area, as you can see here, and that goes all the way down towards New Bedford and back towards Nantucket and Cape Cod, where again we could get some really gusty winds going into the next 48 hours or so. So, of course, definitely preparing for that up that way. Now, as for the southeast, this is where we are seeing some of those showers and storms today. Again, especially down here towards the Augusta area, Atlanta, back down towards Savannah, Georgia, seeing some of those pretty widespread storms this afternoon and evening, some of which did get a little strong. I think we had some hail in downtown Atlanta today. So, again, definitely some more spring and summer-like storms than maybe you might expect to see this time of year. And, of course, those storms are stretching all the way back into Texas, as I mentioned earlier. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and time out the next couple of days for you. I'm not going to focus on Lee right now, although that will be on this map. I'm going to zoom that in here in a second later on in the video, but for now, let's just quickly brief what we're going to see for everyone else here in the eastern half of the country. Now, going through this evening, expect those showers and storms down towards the southeast to fizzle out a little bit, although they could definitely hang around into the overnight hours and even into the early morning hours, especially for a place like the Atlanta metro, maybe back towards Dalton, Georgia as well, seeing some of those showers and storms, but as a whole, I do expect things to calm down slightly. Now, again, the other big story going into tonight and to tomorrow is this other front back out towards the north and west. And you'll notice as we move this ahead into tomorrow afternoon, that slowly continues to creep its way eastbound and will eventually, as we end this weekend, fire up some more storms here for us in the eastern half of the country. Now, tomorrow afternoon looks like a beautiful day. for most people, even up through the northeast of New England, where we're expecting impacts from Lee, outside of breezy conditions that way, still a pretty dry day and a pretty clear day for a lot of people, and really probably going to be the most fall-like day we've had so far this year for a lot of folks. So definitely get out there and enjoy it if you're seeing that nice weather. Now, again, unfortunately, just the way that this high pressure is working, we're getting some of this kind of cold air damming down the side of the mountains here into the southeast and mid-Atlantic. Unfortunately, it's not able to make it all the way down towards Atlanta, Birmingham. So because of that, we're getting a little bit of southerly flow even out this way, and that is leading to some higher dew points and still the chance of storms even tomorrow afternoon, while other folks are getting in on some of that fall-like weather. It's still going to be more muggy and summertime for a place like Birmingham, Atlanta, maybe even up towards Nashville as well. Now, as we get into our Saturday afternoon, that front back out west is going to really begin to start approaching, crossing the Mississippi River at this point, and could even begin to fire up some storms into the southeast going into Saturday. But I really think, especially going into our overnight Saturday and into Sunday, is when this front will really kind of begin to cross the eastern half of the country. You can see this troughing here in the map with these isobars down this way, indicating that, again, that's going to bring some unsettled weather. And with that, of course, I do think some rain, unfortunately, for this weekend, which earlier this week looked a bit drier and nicer, but now has definitely trended towards a little bit warmer, a little muggier, and unfortunately a little rainier. Now, again, the good news with that is, though, it will bring in even more relief going into early next week. Alrighty, so going through these dew points, starting into, let me back this up, towards about 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Again, a lot of folks, it's going to feel great. The Ohio River Valley, going to feel nice, mid-Atlantic, northeast, a beautiful morning and a beautiful day tomorrow. Unfortunately, though, again, just where this kind of cold air damming is getting trapped a little bit, we're going to get some of that southerly flow to keep things warm and muggy in Georgia and Alabama. So, unfortunately, you're kind of getting the not so great end of this deal. But again, I do think relief will come for more folks going into later this weekend and into early next week. And going into our Saturday afternoon, of course, those dew points slowly working their way back up, but still overall relatively nice outside of, again, this time even more places back down towards Nashville, Jackson, Birmingham, Atlanta, still getting in on that muggy weather. But us folks here east of the Appalachian chain, and really I'd say north of kind of the I-20 corridor, still a pretty nice day Saturday. Before Sunday, again, those dew points rise once again, and that chance of rain really begins to pick up. All right, so that's the near term in the East Coast. Now let's really focus on Hurricane Lee and really break down these impacts. Again, quite a very interesting looking storm here on satellite, and you can notice this system is already slowly but definitely beginning to lose some of those tropical characteristics. As you can see, whatever was left of an eye is now a much more open area of low pressure, as the storm has gone through so many eye wall replacement cycles now that wind field has really expanded. And as this begins to combine with this front that is bringing those cooler, nicer temperatures to the East Coast right now, it will definitely lose those tropical characteristics and will eventually, as I kind of draw this out a little bit, kind of really have some warm fronts and cold fronts attached to it, as it's combining that very warm air from the equator coming northward and that cooler, drier air from Canada funneling in and wrapping into the system. So again, it's going to definitely make for a beautiful storm system on satellite, as we're already seeing, but we'll definitely begin to allow it to weaken some and even lose, of course, those tropical characteristics that so often define these storms this time of the year. Alrighty, so taking a look now at the latest cone from the National Hurricane Center, some good news we have seen over the past couple of days is this track has slowly shifted further and further eastbound. So now again, landfall looks more like in between Nova Scotia and Maine, or maybe just Nova Scotia itself, going into Saturday afternoon. Now, this does make the impacts a little bit better in the northeastern coast of the United States. However, again, look at how massive the wind field is on this thing. It stretches from pretty well east of Bermuda there to, very well west of the center. So, again, this is hundreds of miles of width that we're seeing of tropical storm force. And if we draw that same kind of line and width further north, even if the center is over here kind of near Nova Scotia, we're still going to get those tropical storm force winds to go pretty far around that center, well into the northeastern United States. Again, just because of the way that this system is behaving with some of those fronts. So again, latest forecast is for this to lose hurricane strength by the time we get into Saturday afternoon. And again, that's also about the same time it should undergo that transition from a tropical system to extra or post-tropical. But, no matter what the classification is, the impacts will be the same here. Very gusty conditions and very large waves through much of the northeastern United States. Now, the one piece of good news here is that the rainfall forecast doesn't look terribly bad right now. In fact, I definitely think the wind will be a lot more of a factor than the rain. So as we move this ahead, this is tomorrow afternoon. You'll notice in New England still all dry, but definitely as you'll notice these isobars beginning to crunch down a little bit here. If I could get my pen to be solid here and not opaque, that is. You'll notice these isobars here beginning to really crunch down as we get into tomorrow afternoon, as we get into places closer to the coastline, especially places like Nantucket, Cape Cod, really beginning to see that wind pick up tomorrow. But again, you'll notice still relatively dry for the most part. Now, rain won't begin to move into the United States, the landmass here, until about kind of after sunset Friday night and into the early morning hours of Saturday. You'll notice, let me back this map back up, sorry. You'll notice this rain beginning to pick up here into southeastern Massachusetts. Again, Cape Cod, Nantucket, Plymouth, those areas really beginning to see that rain, but also not all that heavy, still relatively light. And as we go through the overnight and into early morning hours of Saturday, those rain bands then begin to rotate into Maine. And I think if anyone sees the most rain out of this, it will definitely be the most eastern sections of Maine here, just because that's going to be the closest to landfall of this system. Now, as for wind, though, I still think the highest impacts wind-wise will likely be for places like Nantucket and Cape Cod, just because we're going to be the closest to the center of that storm while it's still the strongest. And again, with such a large wind field, you're not going to have to be in the center of this thing to feel very strong winds. So moving this through, about the time the sun is coming up on Saturday, again, pretty much just light rain, definitely some heavier bands of rain in there, especially into Maine by the time we get into the early morning hours of Saturday. But by the time we get to Saturday afternoon, we're really drying out in places like Massachusetts, New Hampshire. Any rain that is left likely in eastern Maine, and that rain will continue there in eastern Maine, likely throughout the afternoon hours of Saturday before clearing out, going into the overnight hours, and Sunday looks much nicer. So taking a look at those winds, again, tomorrow, do expect those winds to really begin to pick up as the hurricane approaches. Going into tomorrow afternoon, winds gusting up into 20s and even 30s miles an hour, I should add, here through the eastern section of New England, but especially, again, the Cape, down towards Nantucket, and Plymouth, really seeing those winds pick up. Now, by the time we get towards sunset tomorrow, winds will likely then begin to gust up towards tropical storm strength here into eastern Massachusetts, and will only continue to deteriorate through the overnight hours of Saturday before we get into the early morning hours, the overnight hours of Friday rather, and into the early morning hours of Saturday will likely be the peak of this storm for most folks. So you'll notice winds gusting here well past the upper threshold of tropical storm strength, getting close even to gust towards hurricane strength, going into the very early morning hours of Saturday. And those winds will continue to pick up into eastern Maine going through the afternoon hours of Saturday. But I think once we get past about that 8 a.m. to noon time on Saturday, things should begin to calm down for most people as the storm kind of loses some of that strength, especially down towards Massachusetts. Up towards Maine could stay pretty gusty and pretty feisty through the afternoon hours on Saturday, before then finally those winds really begin to die down going into Saturday night for most folks. Alrighty, so rainfall totals, again, rain isn't a huge concern here. This is definitely rain we can handle. In fact, the most rain we're likely going to see in the United States here in extreme eastern Maine will only likely get to that 2 to 4 inch range. So nothing too crazy. A place like Boston might not even get an inch of rain, as it's more of a windy kind of drizzly mess than anything. So not too worried about flooding here, but of course, if you are in one of those places that is more prone to it, definitely have a way to get those warnings, as things can always change in a heartbeat here with those flooding situations. All right, so that's Hurricane Lee. Let's go ahead and now talk a little bit more about next week. What's after Lee? What are we going to see through the following week? Now, again, the current pattern we're seeing, this is Hurricane Lee on your map here. I'll go ahead and circle for you. That continuing to move northward, but we do have a trough now that will really starting tomorrow begin to dig down into the United States, and that's why we're already seeing some of the rain that we are up into the Midwest. Now, going into this weekend, that trough really begins to dig down, and we kind of get a bit of a combination of energy, one piece of energy up here coming down from Canada, that combining with our normal kind of jet stream that we have down here towards the southern tier of the country, and those are going to work into tandem to really kind of have a pretty potent shot of dry and cooler air going into early next week. Now, of course, because of that, we will have to get through some rain first, but I think going into next Tuesday and Wednesday, things look really nice. It's going to feel quite nice with drier air, even if temperatures still are about average for this time of year. That drier air will make it feel much nicer. So taking a look at that again, I think we'll start off at Saturday afternoon. We took a look at that already with rain possible in sections of the southeast and even the Midwest a bit as those two pieces of energy begin to finally work into tandem. And going into our Sunday afternoon here, you'll notice that rain really begins to pick up here for much of the eastern half of the country. Finally, the Mid-Atlantic could see some rain on Sunday, and we'll definitely have to watch for a bit of a severe risk with this. Nothing off the charts, but definitely, the threat of some strong storms with this front as it moves on through. But you'll notice it comes through pretty quick, and by the time we hit Monday afternoon, we're pretty much dry for most of us outside of us folks in New England who are then finally getting in on that rain. And that dry weather looks to stay around through next Tuesday, likely next Wednesday, even into next Thursday. And you'll notice these isobars showing very nice areas of ridging from this high pressure, funneling in that drier air from Canada. So that will definitely be a very welcome sight, and we'll hope that this can continue to trend quite strongly so more of us can get in on those drier conditions. Now, showing you the dew point here, or about how dry I think it's going to be. Again, we're getting that one shot of cool air now. That won't last too long before that muggy air returns with that next storm system going into Sunday. Before next week, look at this. Very nice dry weather funnels back in, and you folks in Alabama and Georgia who are kind of getting cheated out of that right now, it looks like this front should bring those dew points down into the 50s much further south, maybe as far south as the Gulf Coast, down towards the Pensacola and Mobile, Alabama areas. So definitely have to watch for that, and that is, those nicer dew points look to kind of hold on for a while here, going well into next week. So we'll definitely hope that that continues as we go through the next couple of days. But before we get there, again, we do have to get through Hurricane Lee here, and of course some rain and maybe even a little bit of severe weather this weekend as well. Alrighty, well, again, hope this video was of some use to you. I just got home like 30 minutes ago, so I've had a bit of a long day, but it's definitely good to make a video and get that out for everybody. With that said, though, have a great rest of your Thursday night. Get out there and enjoy some of that nicer weather tomorrow, and I will see you all next time.